You know the story. A magical boy who never grows up whisks children away to a land of adventure, pirates, and fairy dust. For over a century, Peter Pan has captured imaginations worldwide with its promise of eternal childhood and carefree wonder. But the historical record reveals an origin far darker and stranger than Disney ever wanted you to know. Once you understand the real context behind J.M. Barrie's creation, you will never see this children's classic the same way again. It is a tragedy disguised as fantasy, holding some of the most heartbreaking secrets of Edwardian England, and one man's desperate attempt to stop time itself. The story begins not in Neverland, but in a place far more ordinary and infinitely more tragic. Winter 1867 in the small Scottish town of Kirriamure. 6-year-old James Matthew Barrie rushes home from school, excited to see his older brother David, the golden child everyone adored. David was 13, athletic, brilliant, destined for greatness. But that day, James would find his mother in a darkness from which she would never fully emerge. David had been struck by another ice skater during a game on frozen water. He fell, cracked his skull, and died the day before his 14th birthday. The loss devastated their mother Margaret so completely that she took to her bed for months. Young James, desperate to comfort her, would try on David's clothes. He attempted to become the son she had lost, even mimicking his brother's mannerisms and voice. Some accounts say she dressed James as David, pretending her favorite son still lived. His mother found small comfort in one terrible thought. David would remain a boy forever. Death had frozen him in time, preserved his innocence, kept him from the disappointments of adulthood. In her grief-stricken mind, there was something almost beautiful about it. This is where it began, in a grieving mother's twisted consolation and a 6-year-old's desperate attempt to resurrect his dead brother. This childhood trauma anchored itself deep in Barrie's psyche, creating an obsession with boys and the preservation of their innocence that would define his entire life. The boy who would create Peter Pan had learned the most dangerous lesson imaginable. That, to remain a child forever, you must die. But James Barrie didn't die. He grew up, though some part of him never truly left that winter of 1867. He became a writer, moved to London, achieved success. Yet he remained trapped in his own personal Neverland, forever trying to return to a childhood that trauma had stolen from him. And like Peter Pan himself, he would begin collecting lost boys of his own. Fast forward to 1894. Barrie, now a successful writer in London, marries actress Mary Ansell. As a wedding gift, he gives her a dog, not jewelry, not flowers, a dog. Because the dog, it seems, was capable of the affection Barrie himself could not provide. Evidence suggests Barrie never consummated their marriage. He appears to have been either asexual or simply incapable of adult romantic and physical intimacy. 6 years into their union, he would write a thinly veiled confession in his story about a toxic marriage. The character declares there seems to be some curse upon him, that apparently he cannot love the way other men do. His wife would eventually have an affair. Who could blame her? She was married to a man whose heart belonged not to her, but to an impossible fantasy, to boys who would never grow old, to a childhood he could never reclaim. The marriage dissolved in 1909, but by then Barrie had already found what he had been searching for. Not a wife, not romantic love, but 5 young boys who would become his obsession and ultimately his greatest tragedy. If you are finding this story as disturbing as it is fascinating, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We uncover the dark truths behind the stories you thought you knew. Picture Kensington Gardens in 1898. A successful playwright encounters 2 young boys, George and Jack Llewellyn Davies, ages 5 and 4, playing with their nurse Mary Hodgson. Barrie was immediately transfixed. He entertained the boys with his ability to wiggle his ears and eyebrows. He would perform tricks with his Newfoundland dog named Porthos, tell elaborate tales of pirates and adventures, and slowly, methodically, insert himself into the family's life. Barrie became a regular visitor at the Davies household. He spent increasing amounts of time with Sylvia Llewellyn Davies and her boys, despite the fact that both he and she were married to other people. He would vacation with the family, photograph the children extensively, and create personalized adventure stories just for them. The boys came to call him Uncle Jim. In 1901, he produced an elaborate photo album showing the boys acting out a pirate adventure. Titled The Boy Castaways of Black Lake Island, it included 35 mounted photographs with captions depicting a swashbuckling tale featuring a pirate, a tiger, a crocodile, and tropical island explorations. Barrie had 2 copies made. He gave one to the boy's father, Arthur, who promptly lost it on a train. The only surviving copy sits in a rare book library at Yale University, a strange artifact of an increasingly strange relationship. The boy's father, Arthur, was troubled by Barrie's constant presence. Not because he suspected anything sexual, but because this strange little man was interfering with Arthur's own relationship with his sons. Arthur did not particularly care for Barrie personally, though he grew to appreciate the financial support as his own health declined. By now, the Davies family had 5 sons: George, Jack, Peter, Michael, and baby Nico. It was Peter, the middle child, who gave his name to the character. But it was George and Michael who captured Barrie's deepest affections. George was the first, the original inspiration. Michael would become his favorite, the one who mattered most. The character of Peter Pan was invented specifically to entertain George and Jack, but it was Michael's spirit that would breathe life into the boy who refused to grow up. Then tragedy struck with the precision of a curse. In 1907, Arthur Llewellyn Davies died of cancer in his jaw, a horrible, painful death that left Sylvia a widow with 5 young boys to raise alone. Barrie stepped in with financial support. 3 years later, Sylvia herself developed lung cancer. As she lay dying in 1910, she wrote a will naming multiple guardians for her sons: her mother Emma du Maurier, her brother Guy du Maurier, Arthur's brother Crompton Llewellyn Davies, and J.M. Barrie. But here the story takes its darkest turn. After Sylvia's death, Barrie claimed to have discovered a second handwritten will. He sent a copy to Sylvia's mother. The original of that will read that Sylvia wanted the boy's nurse Jenny to work with Mary caring for the children. The copy Barrie sent, however, had changed Jenny to Jimmy, Barrie's nickname. Whether this was an honest misreading or a deliberate forgery remains one of literature's great mysteries. What we know for certain is this outcome. Barrie, age 50, now had primary control over 5 orphaned boys, ranging from 17-year-old George down to 7-year-old Nico. The man who could not love his own wife was now the sole father figure to his muses, his inspirations, his lost boys. And just like in the story he had written, these boys would never truly escape Neverland. But what exactly was the story Barrie had created? The Peter Pan you know from Disney is a sanitized, neutered version of something far more sinister. Let me tell you about the real Peter Pan, the one Barrie actually wrote, the villain disguised as a hero. In Barrie's original 1902 novel, The Little White Bird, Peter Pan first appears. This version is deeply unsettling when read with modern eyes. The book features a narrator who befriends a boy named David by pretending to have a dead son. He uses that lie to manipulate the boy's parents, to create empathy and trust. The narrator becomes particularly excited that the mother has been successfully duped, because that allows him, in his own words, to take the child utterly from her and make him his own. Within the novel, the narrator invents a story about a magical boy named Peter Pan who never grows old. But even this Peter within the story has a dark origin. Peter, as a week-old baby, flew from his nursery, believing his mother would always keep the window open for him. He played happily with birds and fairies, never aging a day. When he finally decided to return home, he found the windows closed and barred. Inside, his mother cuddled a new baby. She had replaced him. Peter learned that his mother's love was conditional, that she moved on without him. That sense of abandonment by a mother figure becomes central to Peter's character. It is why he steals children from their nurseries. It is why he forces Wendy to play mother to the Lost Boys. It is why he can never truly grow up or form real attachments. He is frozen in the moment of betrayal, forever a child seeking the mother who abandoned him. By 1904, Barrie had developed Peter Pan into a full stage play. And here is something most people do not know. In the first draft of this play, there was no Captain Hook. Barrie's notes say he saw no need for a villain like Hook because Peter was a demon boy who could create his own havoc. Peter himself was meant to be the antagonist. Hook was only added later as a practical matter to give stagehands time to change scenery between acts. So what does Peter actually do in Barrie's original story? He steals children from their beds at night, luring them away with promises of adventure. He battles pirates not just in self-defense, but with genuine bloodlust and glee. One particularly chilling passage describes how Peter breathes quick, short breaths because there is a saying in Neverland that every time you breathe, a grown-up dies. Peter was killing them off vindictively as fast as possible. Think about that. The hero of this children's story takes pleasure in the thought that his mere breathing murders adults. Peter strikes fairies, creatures described as no taller than a young child's hand. The narrator notes that fairies are strange, and Peter, who understood them best, often cuffed them. He routinely endangers the darling children. When they fly to Neverland and grow tired, they begin falling from the sky. The text notes this is dangerous because the moment they fall asleep, down they fall. The awful thing was that Peter thought this funny. He would cry gleefully as Michael suddenly dropped like a stone toward the cruel sea far below. But the most disturbing element is what Peter does to his own followers. The original text states clearly that the boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according as they get killed and so on, and when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. Read that again. Peter thins them out. The lost boys who start showing signs of growing up are removed. Given Peter's casual relationship with violence throughout the story, thinned out almost certainly means killed. The 2006 official sequel, Peter Pan in Scarlet, confirms this interpretation. When a lost boy named Slightly shows signs of maturing, Peter banishes him to a place called Nowhere Land, home of the long-lost boys who were previously expelled. Peter and his allies forever ignore these banished boys' existence, as if they never existed at all. Peter also casually alters the lost boys' bodies whenever needed. When they do not fit through tree holes leading to their underground lair, he simply reshapes them by force. He cannot distinguish between real life and pretend. Sometimes he gives the lost boys imaginary meals, and when they complain of still being hungry, he does not believe them. He lacks the fundamental capacity for empathy that makes us human. Peter's emotions are fleeting and meaningless. By the end of the story, he has completely forgotten that Tinker Bell and Captain Hook ever existed. He forgets Wendy within moments of her leaving. His mind is described as having only room for one thought at a time, and even that thought quickly slips away. This is not a hero. This is a deeply disturbed, dangerous entity who happens to look like a child. And Barrie knew exactly what he was creating. He called Peter a demon boy in his own notes. Disney spent decades sanitizing this story, removing the violence, the psychological horror, the implications. They transformed a cautionary tale about the dangers of refusing to grow up into a celebration of eternal childhood. They made Peter charming instead of chilling. They made Neverland magical instead of malevolent. But if you go back and read Barrie's original text, published in 1911 as Peter and Wendy, the darkness is unmistakable. This is not a story about the joys of staying young. It is a story about the tragedy of being unable to grow. And here's the thing that makes it even more disturbing. Barrie was writing this while simultaneously inserting himself into the lives of 5 real boys. While creating a fictional character who steals children and refuses to let them grow up, Barrie was in the real world collecting his own lost boys. The parallels are impossible to ignore. Now let me be clear about something. Most serious biographers, including Andrew Birkin, who had access to the complete Davies family archives, conclude there is no evidence that Barrie was sexually inappropriate with the boys. Nico, the youngest Davies brother who lived to 1980, flatly denied any such behavior throughout his life. Multiple friends of the family saw nothing suspicious beyond Barrie's intense emotional attachment. But that does not make the story less disturbing. Even without sexual abuse, what happened to these boys is a tragedy of almost mythological proportions. Barrie did not need to harm them physically. Life itself seemed to do that for him. Perhaps the curse of being associated with Peter Pan did it. What happened to the Davies boys reads like something from a horror story, not a children's tale. Let me tell you what became of Barrie's lost boys, the real ones. George, the eldest and the first to capture Barrie's imagination, was the golden child. Athletic, handsome, brilliant. With Barrie's financial support, he attended Eton and then Trinity College, Cambridge. During World War I, he served with the King's Royal Rifle Corps in the trenches of Flanders. In March 1915, at just 21 years old, George was shot through the head and killed in action. Days earlier, his uncle Guy du Maurier had also died in combat. Barrie was devastated. He wrote that George's death was the greatest loss he had ever experienced. Jack, the second son, survived the war. He served in the Royal Navy and harbored deep resentment toward Barrie for taking his father's place. Jack felt that Barrie was an interloper who had stolen his family. Their relationship remained strained until Barrie's death. Peter, the middle child who gave his name to the character, perhaps suffered the most psychologically. He served as a signal officer in France during World War I, earning a military cross for bravery. But he returned with what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder, along with a painful skin condition called impetigo. He struggled with the lifelong association with Peter Pan, calling it that terrible masterpiece. Everywhere he went, people called him Peter Pan. He could not escape it. When he married and had 3 sons, tragedy struck again. His wife and possibly his children had inherited Huntington's disease, an incurable neurodegenerative condition. Peter developed severe alcoholism and emphysema. He spent years compiling family documents and letters into what he grimly called the morgue. In this collection, he assembled and sometimes destroyed records of his family's relationship with Barrie. What truths he buried, we will never know. On April 5, 1960, just 5 days after Barrie's former secretary Cynthia Asquith died, Peter Davies, who was 63 years old, lingered at a hotel bar, then walked to the nearby Sloane Square Underground station. He threw himself under an arriving train. The coroner ruled he killed himself while the balance of his mind was disturbed. Newspaper headlines read Peter Pan's death leap and the boy who never grew up is dead. Even in death, he could not escape the character he had inspired. Michael, the 4th son, was Barrie's absolute favorite. By multiple accounts, including those of friends who knew them both, Michael was the brightest, most commanding personality among the brothers. Barrie's relationship with Michael was the deepest and most complex. A school friend later told biographer Andrew Birkin that Michael was the most remarkable person he had ever met, the only one of his generation touched by genius. Michael was prone to nightmares even as a teenager, sensitive, brilliant, troubled. In 1921, while attending Oxford University, Michael was 20 years old when he went swimming with his close friend Rupert Buxton. The two drowned together in circumstances that remain mysterious to this day. Some believe it was an accident, others whisper it was a suicide pact between 2 young men who may have been lovers in an era when such relationships meant ruin. Their bodies were found together in the water. Barrie was utterly destroyed. He wrote that Michael's death was in a way the end of him. He never fully recovered from losing his favorite, the boy who most embodied the spirit of Peter Pan. Barrie lived another 16 years after Michael's death, but those who knew him said something essential had broken inside him that day. Only Nico, the youngest, escaped the curse. He was 6 when his mother died, yet young enough that his memories of a life before Barrie were dim. He was also the only one who never seemed to resent their guardian. Nico worked in Peter Davies' publishing company, lived a relatively normal life, and died of natural causes in 1980 at age 76. He was also the one who provided access to the family archives for biographers, allowing the full story to finally be told. As one of Peter's sons would later say while suffering from the effects of his inherited Huntington's disease, his father believed he would inherit everything from Barrie. That it would compensate for the notoriety of being linked with Peter Pan, something his father hated. But Barrie's will left most of his estate to his secretary. The copyright to Peter Pan had been given to a children's hospital in 1929. The Davies brothers received small legacies, nothing more. Think about this for a moment. 2 of the 5 boys died violent deaths in their 20s. A third killed himself at 63, tormented by a character he never asked to inspire. The family was destroyed by war, mental illness, degenerative disease, and the weight of an unwanted legacy. The author himself, a man so obsessed with preserving childhood innocence that he created an immortal story about it, ended up presiding over the destruction of 5 actual childhoods. He watched lives be destroyed. There is a phrase that has been repeated about Barrie over the years that he had a fatal touch for those he loved. They die. It is almost as if being chosen by Barrie, being selected as a lost boy, carried a curse. George, Michael, Peter, all dead before their time. Only the 2 who were not Barrie's favorites, Jack and Nico, survived to old age. Some have tried to paint Barrie as a predator, a manipulator with sinister intentions. Others defend him as simply a damaged man seeking connection in the only way he knew how. The truth probably lies somewhere between. Barrie was not attracted to boys sexually, most evidence suggests. He was attracted to the idea of boyhood itself, to innocence, to a time before loss, before grief, before the burden of adult consciousness. He wanted to stop time, to preserve a moment before everything went wrong. And in trying to do so, he created one of the most enduring stories in literary history. But he also quite possibly destroyed the lives of the real boys he claimed to love. He wanted to stop time. Because here is what Peter Pan is actually about, stripped of all the Disney magic and childhood wonder. It is about a man so traumatized by death, by his mother's grief, and his own inability to bring back what was lost, that he became obsessed with preventing anyone from ever growing up. It is about the seductive danger of nostalgia, of living in the past, of refusing to move forward into the painful complexity of adulthood. Peter Pan is not aspirational, he is a warning, a demon boy, as Barrie himself called him. Peter is trapped in eternal childhood, which means he is trapped in eternal selfishness, eternal forgetfulness, eternal emotional poverty. He can never learn, never grow, never form real connections. He kills his friends when they start to mature because their growth reminds him of what he has lost, the ability to change, to develop, to become. And Neverland is not a paradise. It is a prison. A place where children are stolen from their families, forced to fight in endless wars, murdered when they start showing signs of independence. The mermaids are cruel, the fairies are jealous and violent. The pirates are locked in eternal combat with children who never die permanently, but never truly live either. It is purgatory dressed up as adventure. When Wendy finally stands up at the end and declares, "You are nothing but a pack of cards," she is not just dismissing fictional playing card soldiers. She is voicing the ultimate truth that Barrie understood but could not accept. That the fantasy is hollow. That eternal childhood is eternal emptiness. That growing up, as painful and complicated as it is the only path to genuine human connection and meaning. The real tragedy of Peter Pan is not that he cannot grow up. It is that he will not. And in his refusal, he takes everyone else down with him. Just like J.M. Barrie, who in refusing to move past his childhood trauma, created a web that trapped 5 real boys and countless readers in a fantasy that celebrates the very thing that destroys us, the inability to accept change and loss. Disney will never tell you this story. They will never show you Peter as the demon boy. They will never mention how the creator of this beloved character dressed as his dead brother to comfort his grieving mother, never consummated his marriage, inserted himself into a family to claim their orphaned sons, and then watched as his favorites died young while his least favorite creation, Peter Pan himself, achieved the very immortality Barrie had always craved. The next time someone tells you Peter Pan is just a fun adventure story for children, remember the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones that promise you can stay young forever. Because childhood ends for everyone, one way or another. You can grow up and move forward into life with all its complexity and pain and beauty. Or you can stay in Neverland, trapped in eternal immaturity, forever alone, murdering anyone who threatens to change, surrounded by the ghosts of the person you might have become. The boy who would not grow up is not the hero of this story. He is the villain. And J.M. Barrie, in creating him, may have understood that better than anyone. He just could not stop himself from trying to become Peter Pan anyway. The real Peter Pan did not die in 1960 when Peter Davies threw himself under that train. He died in 1867 in a Scottish town when a 13-year-old boy named David cracked his skull on the ice, and his little brother James learned the most terrible lesson. That the only way to never grow up is to never grow at all. And that is not magic, that is tragedy.